Marianne, I think you're sharing your desktop, but the presentation's not on the top here. Excellent. All right, let's get started then. So welcome to the Sprint 17 ManageIQ overview. Next slide. The sprint lasted a week longer than normal because there was the winter holiday and most of the engineers were not working during that time. So there's a bunch of stuff that we're going to go over. Not everything has been merged. We'll discuss what has been merged and what hasn't. And we'll provide some progress on what's going on. Next sprint. Next slide. Next. Yeah. So the sprint ended this Monday, January 5th. It seems like I've noticed a trend that we're averaging about 100 pull requests per sprint. So it's good that we're right around that number here again. I do know that there's about close to 60 pull requests out there. That's kind of high. We usually have about somewhere between 30 and 40 at the end of the sprint. So I'm assuming that next sprint we should be well over 100. So as you see here, there's 97 merged, 38 characterized as bugs, 23 as enhancements, and the rest as either technical debt, refactoring, or tests. Next slide. Alrighty, and turn it over to Alberto to give us an overview of where we are on the REST API front.
All right. So last sprint I've been working on the VM management action, and essentially the goal was to closing the gap between us and the SOAP APIs. So there's nine PRs for these actions. They haven't been merged. They're currently in review. So I'll kind of quickly go through here the list. So the actions here would be starting a VM, stopping, suspending, deleting the VM from the VMDB, setting the owner, managing custom attributes of a VM. It's PR 1239. Here it's handled as a sub-collection of API VMs, doing a policy RSOP, adding an event, and adding a scan for a VM. Next slide, please. All right. So similar to the previous post. So essentially, you can target either a single VM by doing a post. Here we're showing a start, but it's basically the same for these actions: start, stop, suspend, and delete. You can also, with a single request, target multiple VMs. You want to start multiple VMs at once. Here you specify the hrefs as resources to kick that off, and then you'll get the requests, feedback for each of them.
Alberto, the hrefs would not have the pound sign in them, right?
Yeah, that's just an example. So it'll be the ID, correct? The ID of the VM. Next slide, please. Okay, and these are basic examples of the different actions with additional data. So setting the owner, you would essentially send in as a resource the owner to set for the VM. Here, as you can see in the post, we're targeting a specific VM/API VM within the ID. RSOP would be a policy, either the name or the large hex identifier. Adding an event, this one works similar to the SOAP API where you're targeting a property value. So as you can see, the post here goes to the collection, but I think we can also support the adding the event to a specific API, a specific VM. So we'll be able to target /API VM, the number we'll do that as part of the review. Same thing with the scan. You can target specific by property and value to scan a particular VM, but we'll enhance that to support the ID. Lastly here, the deletes. Again, we support the delete action, but you can also send in the post action, which also supports here targeting multiple VMs to be deleted. Next slide, please. Okay. Lastly, we'll talk about the custom attributes. Again, this is implemented via a sub-collection custom attributes. So to deal with custom attributes of a VM, it's /API VMs, the ID, and custom attributes. And okay, so for querying, similar to what we did for software and others, you can get the custom attributes by the first form is a simple hrefs. You can expand them with the second form, or get them expanded as you query a specific custom attribute for that VM in the third example. Also, when you get a particular VM, I guess the fourth example should have been API VMs with a number, an ID. You can get the attributes of a VM as well as expanding the custom attributes. So, adding, we support name, value, source, and sections. Here's a basic example, adding name and value, a couple of attributes, updating the next column. You can reference the custom attribute by name, by href, and here we're updating a simple value here. And deleting, again, you can delete by name or href for that VM. That's essentially it. I think that's it. So again, these PRs are currently in review, and hopefully we'll get those merged soon.
Yeah, and presentation.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, next slide, and over to Dan to tell us about new stuff in the UI.
All right. So this is some of the work that's in progress that we've made some headway on. We're trying to get off of prototype onto jQuery. So we've made some progress in this sprint. We're hoping to finish in the next sprint, of course, depending on bug levels and things, and if we run into any more difficult conversions, we might not make that, but we're trying to. It is blocking the full implementation of pattern flag. We do have some conflicts with some menus and things, so we really need to get off of prototype. Also started some work on the Pluggable UI, which is going to allow other plugins to be dynamically added to our web UI. We're just getting started on it. We're trying to clear off some prereqs, try to factor some codes to make it easier to dynamically merge in other plugins such as the menus and RBAC and probably other things, tagging and stuff later. And that's it for this. Next slide. Okay, the other thing, one of the other things that we actually got in, if this is merged in, and in this should be in the latest sprint builds, you can now set the locale based on either set the server default or the user can specify which locale they want to use. Now there's some caveats here. We just have the UI in to make the changes. It will show all locales that are present in that folder there. There are some sample .po files there that are ready to have translations added. There's a couple lines in there just so we could do our demo last sprint for the login panel. But you can also add new locales by adding folders into that locales folder. There's more coding to be done. There's more get text calls that still need to be added. But for the most part, if you want to try it out, if you do some translations for the flash messages and any of the views that are converted to HAML currently, they all have the get text calls inside, so you'll be able to demonstrate this or actually try this out. Next slide. All right, this is where you would find the UI to change the server locale. This is actually would set the server default. So you can see the top choice there is the client browser setting. So that would say that the the UI will default to whatever the user has his browser set to, or you can lock it down to a certain language. Next slide. The user can also change theirs on their My Settings page. They can either take the global default, which is what was set by the administrator in the last on the last screen, or they can set it to any of the available locales. All right, next slide. All right, so we've been working on converting our editors to use AngularJS, and some of the reasons are to try to eliminate a lot of the AJAX transactions we have going on, and some of the storage we're doing in the session object, and just modernize the UI with some of the pattern fly stuff that we can hook in after this is done. So we've got a small editor in, the repository editor. It really only has a couple fields on it, but it was a good place to start. So what this does is it eliminates some of the actual edit variables that we were storing. It used to be that the server would remember the before and after images, the before and after values of the thing that you were editing. Now all those are done in the browser, and all the changes are made local in the browser. So as you're clicking around on this edit screen, you will not see transactions coming to the server. We've also added one of the fields here has a field validation. We're using Angular directives for that to actually verify field content real time, and at the same time putting out the error messages real time as the fields are in error. Still to come, you'll see right now we're using our flash messages, so the errors for the fields will show up on top. But once we get prototype gone, and we can get into more pattern flag, we're going to actually put field messages directly below the fields, or at least around the field. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to do it. So the field errors will be located right near where the fields are. All right, so I've got a demo of this. Aparna, who wrote the repository editor, has created a demo for us. I'm going to try to share that now. Let's see. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, I'll start it off, and it's got subtitles, so it's self-explanatory. So I'll be quiet. And kudos, Aparna, for production quality. That's it. I'll stop sharing. I think we're done for the UI part.
Very cool.
Quick question. Sorry, quick question here from Pete Savage. Presumably we're still doing server-side validation after the value gets to the server.
We are not. We are doing as much local validation as we can. When we get to some more complex forms and one field depends on another, we will issue an AJAX transaction at that point, but it will be simply sending data back down to the form below and all of the validation is being done locally in the browser.
Dan, are you saying that we won't do any server-side validation?
Oh, we will. When you go and hit save or something, we will definitely check to make sure that it's not a duplicate and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that's what I was meaning.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So at the end, yes, it will definitely do that. Yep.
Right. All right, next slide.
All right. So in the realm of provider integrations, during this sprint was mainly working on some bug fixes. I want to call one out in particular. We fixed something with handling getting OpenStack images from the OpenStack API. The OpenStack API likes to paginate, so it only gives us back 25 images on the first request, and we fixed that. So now we handle that pagination in the background and then present all the images forward to the UI, and then allow our UI to do whatever it needs to do to show them. The interesting thing about this was actually that the work was done by a developer who's not on the core ManageIQ team, which I think is, it's great to see the community getting involved. And he is a Red Hat developer, but he's not part of the team that works on ManageIQ day to day. I want to jump into some future work that we're tracking right now. We have some OpenStack infrastructure support coming along. The kickoff was actually this week. We're targeting OOO as the infrastructure provider for OpenStack. We're really excited about this work. I think it'll kind of expand our view into OpenStack, whereas currently we only see the cloud view of OpenStack. Now we're going to be able to see hosts and anything else that is kind of the basis for the OpenStack infrastructure. The other thing is our New Year's resolution to support containers. We're getting some investigation into Kubernetes and containers. This investigation started before the holidays. There's a lot of research to do. So I don't want to set expectations. This is going to happen tomorrow, but we are making progress in this. And also the development team is working really closely with the OpenShift development team. So we kind of track, where Kubernetes is going, how does it play nicely with OpenShift in general, and that whole kind of that PaaS integration that we eventually want to have as our main target in that space. There's an exciting footnote about those two endeavors. Both of those teams are external development teams. Now, I say that, they are Red Hat employees, but they're not part of the ManageIQ core team. I think for us, this is a big step forward in our efforts to build a developer community. And, we have some growing pains around this kind of project management integration, but we plan on getting the task tracking into our Trello board so we can show their progress in our project. And I think it has a lot of future implications for general community involvement. And we also want to start integrating their progress into our sprint demos as well. And then a quick update on what we're doing with pluggable providers. So even as we're getting help from external teams to start adding support for new provider components, those efforts are being done in the current code base. So as things stand today. At the same time, we have other efforts going on to keep moving pluggable providers forward. We really do want to have this concept of being able to separate out the provider implementation code from the core code base and allow better enable external developers to add provider support. There's a lot of requests coming for this. I hear about it probably every week. Someone asks me about, hey, can we get these guys to help out add this provider? And while the answer is technically yes, it would be a lot easier if we had pluggable providers. We hired Matthew Draper late last year, and he's just sunk his teeth into this, and he's just really making a lot of progress. I'm really excited about it. I'm hoping by the end of this current sprint, we can, the sprint that we're starting, I think this week, we can show some kind of progress on that front. Really excited about that. And that's it.
All right, on to Greg.
Yep. So in this sprint, we merged in the refresh of the AWS CloudFormation's information. So currently this is on the database, but there's no UI around this. We've talked to the UI team, working, kind of planned out the design, so that's kind of in their hands now. Some other PRs that got merged around this are things that we needed for the goal of getting towards provisioning, which are being able to parse the parameters for the template and ultimately being able to create service dialogues from those that can then be assigned to a service provision. So right now, the last piece kind of coming together here is the being able to subclass the service for an orchestration provision request and run that. We have that working where it runs through Automate and workflows, and the PRs kind of pending on that. There's some tests basically needed and obviously reviewed and stuff. So that is getting very close. Since we don't have a UI, what we want to do is put together a quick video we'll talk over that just kind of shows the refresh, the data, the correlations, and associations that we're pulling back.
Is OpenStack Heat on the same trajectory, or is it coming afterwards, or?
OpenStack we've had some issues right now through the fog gem, so we haven't gone through those yet.
But conceptually it should work the same way, right?
Yes, modeling wise and everything else, that's all taken into account, right?
Perfect.
So it's the data collection piece that, it's kind of holding us up there.
So I'm going to show this video.
Mm-hmm.
So initially, so since we don't have a UI, so I'm going to use NetCAD to look into our table. So initially, I just want to make sure every application-related table out there are empty.
Is anybody seeing his video?
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So I go to the AWS console window, and so here we see there are already 6 stacks there, and the one particular one is the other one with complete status. And then I use the Rails console window to issue a refresh command to refresh the Amazon AWS provider. So it will take a few seconds to complete the refreshing. Yeah, so the refreshing is done. The video is slow. Okay, so we go to the stack table, and then here we see 5 stacks in our table, and that particular one is with the complete status. And we look at the template ID. It's associated with the template, and this stack has the ID 45. Then we go back to AWS console window to see the output. There is only one output, and then we go to our table to see the output is there and with the stack ID 45. And then we look at the next one is for the resources. And there are 4 resources from the console window. Then we go to our table. And we also have a resource table. here we see all resources from all the stacks. Particularly, we want to look at the stack 45. Yeah, so we see some 45 there, but I want to make sure every resource is cached. So I do a sorting. Then you can see under ID 45, there are 4 resources. So they are the same as showing the AWS console window. Particularly, we want to see that is one instance generated. So we go back to the VM table, and we want to find that a particular instance is associated with stack 45. So we see there, and then I want to do a sort to make sure there's only one instance for that resource, for that stack 45. So after sort, we see, yeah, there's still only one instance. And also the instance name is the same, ending with DD 7. And next is the template itself. So here we see the content of the template. Then we go to our table. And we have 5 stacks. They are generated from 3 templates. Particularly, we're looking at this one, and we see the content. The same. And last is the parameter. For this one, we have 2 parameters, and then in our table, we see the same parameters showing for stack 45. Yeah, so we have 2. That's the demo.
Excellent.
Yeah, so this sprint we're hoping to get provisioning further along that we can demo that, and then
And then tie that together into the UI, all the stuff that we're seeing in the database.
Yes.
Great. Nice progress.
All right. In this sprint, then we were enabled radio buttons to be dynamic controls, similar to the way the dynamic dropdown works. But we're kind of taking a different approach here, and we'll ultimately convert the dropdown to work the same way, that it's not a separate field type. But so we've added a dynamic checkbox as part of the properties. And if it's unselected, you have the settings that you had prior, where you set the options of how it's sorted or if it's required, and below you provide the static entries that will be displayed in that item. So next slide. Right, so once you check, go back one, please.
One back, please.
Yeah. So once you select dynamic, then those options go away, and those get provided through the automate method that's pointed to at the entry point there, and then a few options similar to dynamic dropdown that we exposed to be able to refresh those if you need that, and if the values get loaded initially. Okay, next slide. And then this is just kind of my quick sample that I usually use to validate some of this stuff, providing basic values. Those are selected largely because the sorting, which is defined, in return from this script as well, if it's an integer or string type, sorts differently, as well as throwing something like time in there that when I refresh, I can see the value changing on the screen as I run it. It's very simple. And then you can see the default value being passed back is 2, and that's the initial shot of the screen coming up. So the idea is that we want to get all of the controls eventually having an option to call into Automate to return their settings and values. And then, like I said, convert the drop-down at some point to have this dynamic flag instead of a separate field. So we're working towards a text box and text area for the next sprint and see. Yep. All right, next slide. Brian, you want to?
Sure. So previously we had support for provisioning OpenStack instances based on an OpenStack image. We had somebody that requested the ability to be able to launch an OpenStack instance based on a volume or volume snapshot. So looking into this a little bit further, we found out that Fog had support for block device mapping, but not the newer block device mapping V2. So this had to be enhanced in Fog. Added support for block device mapping V2. This allows you to set multiple volumes to connect to an instance. They can be source type of a snapshot or a volume. And then when the new instance is launched, it has those devices attached in the boot index order, and you no longer need the image. So we set the image ref to nil. And below at the bottom of the slide is an example of how you can do this in Automate to launch an instance based on one or multiple block devices.
Do you still specify a size, or is it fixed?
You can still specify size. There's several other parameters that OpenStack accepts. This was just a quick example to keep it short on the slide.
So where should people go to kind of see the full set of options? Is that on the PogGem, or where should they go and look?
That's on the OpenStack API. Their block device mapping shows you all the details there.
Thanks. Next slide.
Cool. For the foreman side of things, our data modeling in 947 is done. We're just getting ready to merge it in. It basically introduced the provider, which up until now we've basically had only one kind of provider called an external management system and children of those. So now that's introducing a new concept. So for the collection and the inventory for the refresh, those are all done and we're saving. So all that work is good. It's just the integration of the provider concept instead of the external management system, children, that's proving most of the work for the future sprint going forward. So mostly just working through coming with a more generic way of performing a refresh across not only an external management system, but across providers for foreman and who knows with the pluggable providers, what else is in store for us. And that's all for foreman.
So then the event switchboard, there aren't currently any PRs out there right now, but this is kind of a big chunk. It's hard to modify any of it without affecting the current system, so kind of held off on that a little bit. But we've gotten the event routing through Automate largely in place. Right now, we're refactoring the active record models for EMS event to create a base event class and then start to build multiple events on top of that for our synthetic events as well as provider events and possibly custom events. That ultimately will probably drive some refactoring of the routing a little bit, which is what we were looking at earlier this week. But this is just kind of touching a lot of areas in the code, so it's it's been a big process to go through and find all the areas that we need to tweak. But
and once this is in place, it'll allow people to do.
It'll allow people to drive events through Automate to whatever process they want to at that point, right? They can reroute them back through Automate or into policy or pretty much any place.
So.
Yep.
Next slide.
the intent, Greg, there, right, is to get rid of that, whatever it is, the event CSV file then?
Yeah, the event handling YAML file. Ultimately, yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. I'll talk about some changes we did on the testing side. The biggest change that we did was Travis added support on their side for running their own infrastructure on Docker, but it's opt-in, so we opted in. The Travis itself ends up running a lot faster, particularly startup. So instead of taking a minute or two to spin up a VM on their side, it comes up in literally seconds. I've seen when there's not a lot of, like in the middle of the night when there's not a lot of heavy use on Travis, if we make a pull request, I see Travis pick up the request and run 5 of our pieces of our test suite immediately, and they just start running right away. So that's a huge change. It makes a lot of the problems that we've been having for Travis taking too long, kind of cuts that out. Because once you Dockerize Travis, they added for open source projects what they're calling bundle caching. And the way that works is when a test suite comes up, instead of doing a bundle install from scratch, it knows what was run last time, and it kind of collects all that up and tars it and stores it on S3. Their S3, it's not ours. And then when the next one comes, it downloads that bundle, drops it in place, and then just does a bundle update. And the timings have been a lot better. For one, rubygems.org is unreliable. So in the past, you may have seen it goes to bundle install your gems, and then it can't, and then has to start all over again. And it tries up to 3 times. Downloading from S3 isn't unreliable, so it just downloads and it's good to go. So the bundle install times have gone down to about 1 minute from about 5 minutes. So we saved about 4 minutes on every single individual run. Total time, I just wrote in here the VMDB test suite, but the total time has dropped down from 26 minutes to 13 minutes just for that one run. Some of the other ones have taken the 4 minutes, they've gone from like 5 minutes down to 1 minute. So the total end-to-end time for running the entire test suite is significantly improved. Next slide, please.
And those Travis runs happen on each and every pull request.
Every push to every pull request.
Every push to every pull request.
Yeah.
So it happens a lot.
And when we merge the pull request in, it runs on the main line as well. Actually, that's the bundles, when they're uploaded, happen when we merge it to the main line. So when you make a pull request, it knows, oh, I'm going to merge that into master. Let me use master's bundle. So details on how it works. The other thing that I worked on was putting together a document about the new provider architecture. It's in issue number 1272 there. And I'll be opening discussions up to talk.manageiq.org and see if I can get some more input from the wider community. But the main idea behind the new provider architecture is I want to introduce a layer above the management system called a provider. And then the EMS layer I'm calling manager. And the reason I'm changing the name there, the objects in the code will say HT management system for now, but that layer I want to call manager because we're going to have new types of managers as well. As we start going into completely new provider types like containers, the management system or the provider essentially will be Kubernetes, and it's going to manage containers, groups of containers, tasks, things like that. So the management system will be Kubernetes, and the provider will be the whole group. On the third bullet there you see, the main summary is the provider will have many managers. This allows for adding new things like Foreman, but we can also take the existing things like OpenStack Cloud and add OpenStack Infra and have it bundled under the same umbrella. And with the current EMS layout, we can't do that. So that's very, very high level. If you want the details or you want to understand where I think the direction should go, take a look at that issue. And
also the manager can share authentication from the provider, right? So for example, in Amazon, we used to have each region in Amazon used to be a separate EMS inside ManageIQ. I think with this re-architecture, we will have the Amazon provider, and you'll give it your credentials, and then each region inside would become a manager.
Right.
So you don't have to re-enter all your credentials each time.
Right. And this will give us a direction moving forward on, it's not a complete like revamp, it's more like tacking on, and the existing stuff will should still fit under this same umbrella.
Yep. Cool. Thanks. Thanks, Jason.
Yep.
Okay, so this past sprint, I spent more time on IPv6 in regards to OpenStack, and also a little bit on overt/revum. Some of the stuff that was being done was primarily on the underlying library side. So on this slide, just describing what the actual problem is that typically a lot of the libraries build the URLs, URIs for web requests using just string building. And the problem is with IPv6 is that the literals, in this case, the corresponding localhost, which is : 1, needs to be wrapped in square brackets. So you need that for URIs, and when you build the actual request header, you need to specify square bracketed : 1. But when you actually make a socket connection, you actually have to unwrap them. So a lot of the underlying libraries don't do this. So when you go on to the next slide, we'll go through each of those libraries and what's been done. So previously, in one of the past sprints, the VMware side was fixed. It was really VMware using handsoap, which is using the underlying HTTP client. And so the HTTP client had already been fixed, and we just had to upgrade and verify that it was working. Then on the overt/revum side, it's using REST client, which uses the Ruby standard library net HTTP. So there were a few changes that need to be done for those. So we have those are now merged, both on Ruby 2.0 and also the REST client has been updated, and we're just waiting for releases for those to come out. Next slide, please. The primary one I was working on this sprint was on the OpenStack side. Unfortunately, they do all over the FOG and XCON libraries. They build URIs just throwing in the host value without regard to whether it's IPv6 or not. So there's a lot of work to be done to address IPv6 when you put it in for socket connections versus your URIs. So there's a lot of work on there that still needs to be done. In addition, a lot of the core Ruby URI library has changed significantly from early versions of Ruby, like 1.8.7 and 1.9.2. So the fact that we were able to get them to drop support for older versions of Ruby, older than 1.9.3, should simplify using the core URI library. And so that's going to be coming up when FOG goes to the next version. Then the other libraries we need to work on are verify the AWS SDK and the WinRM gem for Microsoft. And that uses the underlying HTTP client, which is also the one we used with VMware. And so that should possibly be okay. It shouldn't be a problem. Okay, next slide. So after all those underlying libraries are fixed to support using IPv6 literals, which are could be those really long strings with a bunch of colons in them, we need to work on modeling. So some of the things that need to be done are we currently support putting a IPv4 IP address and a host name, but it's not clear which one is being used. So we'll need to be able to clarify that and be able to specify a IPv6 literal when setting up a CI in the ManageIQ UI. And then we have to change our code to use the proper one. And then on the discovery side, similar to IPv4, you can specify a start IP address and a range. We need to do the same thing with IPv6. So that's to do. Next slide, please. And so this is just a summary. From the communication side, two of them, one is done. The REST client, Revum over is nearly done, and then we're still working on OpenStack, and we need to start Amazon and Microsoft. And the modeling, discovery, and provisioning still need to be done, and also the work of getting the appliance that we build to actually run with IPv6. That hasn't been started yet. That's it.
Thanks, Joe. Aaron?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, cool. So this sprint, I was still working on upgrading our branch to Rails 4. Most of the stuff I was working on, so we have two main points of integration with Rails, and by integration, I mean like extending Rails's functionality, and that's with our virtual columns, virtual reflections, and the preloader code. The virtual column stuff works with the preloader, but they're two sort of independent pieces. I was working on upgrading those so that they work with Rails 4. Currently, the preloader works against Rails 4, so that seems to be working fine now. Our virtual column stuff is also ported to Rails 4. We have some failing tests for that, but I think that that's because those tests, I had to change the virtual columns API, and those tests are testing the underlying API that our application doesn't actually use. So how this shows up is that, or I guess a way to simplify this explanation is that you can use our models with virtual columns. You can use the declarative forms, and actually using the models and doing the reporting works, but the test that's testing the underlying code, those break. So you could think of it as our integration tests are working, but the unit tests need to be updated. So I'm working on that for the next sprint. A lot of the other stuff I've been working on is moving a lot of our active record 2.3 hash API stuff. So saying like find :all and then passing conditions hashes, converting those over to active record where like relation statements, and then spend a lot of time backporting all these to master. So most of the patches that you see from me on master in this release are just refactorings that'll make the code work both on our version of Rails 3 and work on Rails 4. And the point of this is just so that when we do the Rails 4 upgrade or the final Rails 4 patch, we want to make that as small as possible so that everybody can understand exactly what's going on. And that's what I was working on for the sprint.
Cool. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
Rich, you want to talk about storage?
Okay. Yeah, we have a number of works in progress. As mentioned in the previous sprint demo, we're starting on OpenStack instance fleecing. As a prerequisite to that, I had hoped to integrate the new Glance API, which lets us access perform random block access on images.
Also line stuff.
Yeah, which would make fleecing and testing a lot faster. Unfortunately, that was it's completed on the Glance side of the back end. They haven't implemented front end access to it, and in addition, it's limited in that it's only supported for file store Glance images. So if it's based on S3 or something else, it's not supported. So unfortunately, we can't take advantage of that. So now we'll can basically forge ahead without that. It'll be a little slower. Back from the break, I have been diverted by some bug issues that have taken precedent over this, and once they're cleaned up, I'll get back to that. Additionally, yes, CVMM fleecing is on hold as Jerry is working on some build stuff, and she also mentioned that there's an ongoing issue that has been uncovered at a number of sites where VDDK. Turn off your mic, please. Is reporting errors, and Jerry's also been looking into that. Unfortunately, that's something we haven't been able to reproduce in-house, so we'll have to work with the field. and customers to hopefully work through that, and hopefully by the next sprint we'll have some feedback on that. Fleecing tests, a few sprints ago, Mo added the foundation of automated tests for fleecing in Travis. We plan on extending that. Most notably, we'll have define a repository containing various types of images of different combinations that we could use to test different things. In addition to benefiting the automated tests, developers could also use that in bug resolution and testing, unit testing, things like that. So that should help out. Above and beyond that, we plan on extending those tests to the full fleecing stack, including, isolating each layer and testing each layer independently, and that's what we'll be working on. That's
cool. Thank you. All right, next slide. I think the last slide. Yeah, so here's the scheduled sprint. The next few sprint demos are up there. So first one's today's, and the next one is 3 weeks from now. We try to keep a 3-week cadence, so hopefully that's I haven't checked the dates there, but hopefully those are 3 weeks all in between on Wednesdays. All right, I'll open it up to questions and comments. All right, well, if there's no questions or comments, I want to wrap this sprint demo up and say thank you to everyone who worked on all the items, and thank you to all the presenters. And as usual, this should make it over to our YouTube channel, the ManageIQ YouTube channel. So anyone who missed it, you can certainly send around a link to them to take a look at the sprint demo there. So thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.